welcome back to Dixie Belle's YouTube channel on this fine FFT Friday. We are back here with another dresser flip, and this is actually going to be a commission piece that I have, and I am here in Nebraska, and this person is one of my followers over on FFT channel, and she is from Minnesota, and I am doing this as a custom order for her. She saw the chest that I did in the green mint color. If you haven't watched that video, be sure to head over to my channel after you watch this video to check that one out. And then she wanted that one, but it was sold. Long story short, this one is the matching to it, so I am going to be making this one look exactly like that chest. So let's get started. We're just going to go ahead and remove the hardware. All right, so I'm going to be saving this hardware to just put right back on there. We'll probably clean it, well, I will clean it up, and then I want to make it just a little bit more of a bolder gold color. This hardware is so unique and beautiful that I am so excited that we get to keep it. When I keep hardware, I just make sure to put it inside of a container. That way I don't misplace it or lose it. Look at that hardware. This was the matching hardware to the chest, and I think that is just so unique, and I feel like you could do it either way, up or down, up and down or sideways. This one just had the holes already for the up and down, so that's the way that I'm gonna keep it. Okay, hardware is off, and this has been sitting in our garage for a little while, so it's quite dusty. But also, if you look underneath the hardware, you're gonna see that it is very dirty and dusty underneath there. So that puts us at our next step of cleaning down the piece. We are going to be using White Lightning Cleaner from Dixie Belle, and I've dissolved some into my spray bottle. I'm gonna spray everything down and give it a nice wipe. So not only do we need to clean the outside of the piece where we're gonna be painting, but we're also gonna go ahead and wipe down the inside of the piece because we wanna get all of that dust out of there. So as I was cleaning down here under the inside of the dresser, I noticed that this drawer rack is a little bit broken back here, which is not a big deal, but it's just making it so that the screw no longer holds that in place. So I'm just gonna be using my Titebond wood glue and go ahead and put a little bit back there so that we can make sure that this doesn't move around so that the drawer still will slide nice and easy. Nothing crazy. Just gonna put that back there. And unfortunately, a clamp won't fit back there. It can't clamp onto anything, but I think that just the fact of having it there with the glue, there's enough glue for it to just stick. So that'll dry in the meantime while we are painting and doing the rest of the things. But I am actually done cleaning, so now I need to go ahead and rinse everything off. When you use the White Lightning like that, you want to make sure that you get that residue that it leaves behind off so that your paint isn't going to be sticking to that, and that part isn't going to be in your paint, but that just the clean slate will be what you are painting onto. Dirty water shot. Now that everything is all clean, we are ready to do a scuff sand. So this surface is pretty glossy, and it's gonna be hard for that paint to stick to the surface. And so what that means is I am going to be taking my sander, and I'm just gonna be kind of roughening up the surface a little bit, as well as smoothing out any of the scratches and things like that. On this one, there really isn't anything that's too bad. The only thing that I did notice is that over here, some of the veneer has peeled off. And so after I'm done sanding, I'm gonna put some Dixie mud over that to fill in that little imperfection. But that's really the only imperfection that I have noticed that won't come out with just a sander. You know, there's a few little scratches here, but they are not even deep into the finish, so I'm not worried about those. Those will just sand right out. And the rest of the dresser, again, these will also just sand right out. Sanding is finished, so it took me just a little bit longer because I really wanted to get around the edges of the drawers, and for some reason, they had this black residue around the outsides of the drawers, and I just really wanted to sand that as smooth as possible and to try and get rid of as much of that black as possible. I really don't know what that is. I've never seen it before, and I did see it on the matching dresser, but I still am confused about what that is. I don't know if it was the treatment that they did on the dresser. Like, you can see it all up in here. So it must have just been like the way that whoever made this treated the dresser before they put the veneer on. That's my only thought. So I'm gonna clean it off with a microfiber cloth to get all that dust off, and then we'll be ready for some boss. It's boss time. Kind of like prime time, but boss time. It's right. Okay, not quite boss time. I gotta do some Dixie mud. So they've got white and they've got brown. I'm using white, and we're just going to scoop it out a little bit and fill in the veneer. And then you probably noticed I did the same thing in the same area over on the other side, so I'll just need to fill that as well. Just kind of flatten it out as much as possible, but then that sander will help flatten it out once it's actually dry. Okay, so that'll dry, hopefully quickly because it's not too thick, and then we'll be able to sand that smooth. In the meantime, while that's drying, I'll probably just go ahead and start the boss and just not do it around these areas until it's dry. All right, so right before we put the boss on, I'm gonna go ahead and tape off these gold parts so that I don't get any paint or primer on there. So I'm just using some green painter's tape to make sure that they get completely covered up. Tape is all on there, everything's covered, so we're ready for some boss. I'm gonna be using gray boss today, and then I'm gonna be using my oval brush from Dixie Belle as well, and that's all we're gonna do. We're just gonna paint it on, and the boss is going to just help us to cover up the stains, and it's gonna block the stains from popping through the color of the paint. Boss is not an adhering primer, so it's not gonna help the paint stick to the piece, but that's kind of why we did the sanding. I finished most of the boss, but I've just got to go ahead and sand down that Dixie mud, and then I'll do the last little sections. But otherwise, we're ready to do a light sanding and put on the mint julep. So I've got my sanding block, and Dixie mud is really easy to sand down. Boss is gonna dry now. It's mostly dry, but I just want the rest of it to continue drying, and then we'll move on. Boss is dry, so I've got my sanding sponge here, and I'm just going to smooth out the boss. It doesn't have too much texture, but just to make sure everything is smoothed out before we put the paint on. Okay, let's paint. So I'm just gonna go ahead and spray down each drawer as I go along. Also gonna add some to my brush and a little bit in the paint. The misting will also just help you eliminate brush strokes a little bit more. I do get a lot of questions about brush strokes, and you know, if you're using a brush, it's basically inevitable, unless you have a self-leveling paint such as the silk paint, it's basically inevitable to not get brush strokes. So try to lessen them by watering down your paint a little bit, but they're just going to be there. Don't get too caught up in it as long as they're not like super duper noticeable. Coat number 1 is all finished up, so we'll let that dry. We'll come back for coat number 2. Right before we go on to the second coat on the dresser and the drawers, I'm gonna go ahead and do a first coat here on the mirror. I debated doing it gold or green, and I think just the best look will be green, having up on top of the mirror. I already prepped it by just sanding it a little bit, and I taped it off. Just needs a quick coat of paint for coat number 1, and then we'll go on to coat number 2 on everything else. Good on the mirror, first coat, so let's go on to second coat on everything else. Okay, done with coat number 2 on everything except for the mirror. So I'm gonna go check and see if that's dry. And if it's ready for coat number 2, I'll go ahead and do that. But otherwise, we're just gonna let this dry before we do the top coat. And I'm gonna go ahead and work on the hardware in the meantime. It was dry, so I'm gonna go ahead and do coat number 2 over here. I was just telling Neiman this paint goes a long way. I told you at the beginning that I only had used 1/3 of the jar when I had done the first chest of drawers, and now I've really only used another 1/3 of the jar when I have been doing this dresser. So this is a 16 ounce from Dixie Belle, and I've still got 1/3 of my paint left. That's crazy because you could use a whole jar to coat almost 3 dressers, at least the way that I'm using it. Just thinning it out enough and making thin layers rather than those thick layers. That also helps you really eliminate those brush stroke marks. So, by the way, if you don't know who Neiman is, he's the man behind the cam. If you haven't seen our videos over on our channel, be sure to head over there and check them out. He makes cameos in some of those. We're gonna let this dry and then we'll be back for a top coat. We are ready to do the top coat. I'm gonna be using Dixie Belle's clear coat in flat. So no sheen, nothing like that. It's just gonna give it that protective layer. And I'm gonna be using the Fan Mini today to do my top coat, which this is the brush that I enjoy using with any top coat. It just seems to go on really well and nice and smooth. Just like with your painting, you want to go in one direction. Now, again, I've got these little seams here, so I'm going to just go ahead and do a little bit up and down so I can get those clumps out of the seams, but then I will always go back and make sure to smooth everything out the same direction. Okay, top coat is on. That's gonna dry and then we'll put everything back together, including the hardware, and then we'll get ready to just see the end result. All right, let's go ahead and take this tape off. Everything is dry. And we've also got some tape to take off of the dresser, and I'll probably need to do a little bit of touch-ups because that is what I had to do last time. But we'll go ahead and get the hardware on and get that all touched up. All right, so while I am putting these drawers in here, I'm going to also go ahead and butter up the slides so that they can slide nice and easily. And I am going to be using Big Mama's Butter in an Orange Grove scent. And go ahead and do it on the actual drawer in the slide, and then also on the slide that's in the dresser. My wood glue down here worked, so that's good. That rack is gonna be nice and snug. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get the hardware in here. So what I actually ended up doing with the hardware is spray painting it with gold. When you're installing the hardware after you've painted, you just wanna be really careful and you just want to go nice and slow so that the hardware doesn't go crazy and so that it doesn't ruin your paint job. Hardware is on. Isn't it beautiful and pretty? So my last thing that I've got to do is take the tape off and touch up because I can already tell some of it is going to come off with the tape. And this is just a really hard area to paint. There we are. So definitely some touch-ups. I'll just have to kind of sand some of this down a little bit to smooth it out. And then also not only touch-ups, but also some of it got on the gold. So I'll have to go through and scrape that off as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my artist brush out and fix that up. So artist brush just means like a smaller brush, and I'm just gonna do these ones so that I can have some more control in my swipes with the paint. We are all finished up with our touch-ups. All we've got that's left is to put a top coat on the parts where I touched up and then attach the mirror, and we are good. So this is a commission piece, so we don't need to take photos to put on Marketplace to sell, but we are gonna take photos because, again, we love to see that before and after, and then also so you guys can see that as well. All right, this piece is all finished. We took some photos and I love the way that it turned out yet again. Again, it's the matching to one that I had already done, so doing it again, I was able to go faster. I hope you guys enjoyed this flip and realize how awesome it is sometimes to step outside of your comfort zone. Thank you guys so much for watching. The person will be here to pick this up in about a week or so, and we ended up on a price of $350. So after getting the dresser for $45, that's gonna give me a total profit of $305. Thanks to Dixie Belle for having me back on their channel yet again for another FFT Friday and supplying this awesome paint and other materials so that I could complete this project. We'll see you guys next week. See you on the flip side.